experienced by yogis in meditation, that supreme being I salute. Good morning, Swami Kripamananda is in Houston, Hollywood. As you know, he's been here for a few years, but only recently he got his permanent residency, and therefore there's pent-up demand from North American centers for him to visit. And so he's visiting, as I said, Houston and Hollywood. The words of Swami Vivekananda are quite extraordinary. I was very moved by the reading. It's amazing that though they are written words, we can still read them and get such power from them. It seems to me a panacea for life's problems is to pick up some essay or lecture by Swami Vivekananda and just start reading. And it should be read with gusto, as Abhijit did. The subject today is the science of human possibilities. In the year 1859, Sri Ramakrishna was 23 years old, and that was 4 years before Swami Vivekananda was born. In that year, Charles Darwin published his treatise on the origin of species. In this work, he documented many species and tried to classify them into families according to levels of organization. The book, as you know, was controversial, and its main thesis was that species did not appear all at once, but evolved. Over a period of time, one species would morph into another species by a process that was quite natural. Darwin hypothesized that the main catalyst of this evolutionary process was natural selection and survival of the fittest. All of his data was taken from the animal and plant kingdoms, and his conclusions referred to those domains. However, it was natural to ask whether such processes could apply to humans. While acknowledging that the process probably did apply to humans, Darwin was careful to add that at the human level, there are other mechanisms than competition and survival that are responsible for evolution. Darwin's theory was controversial on two fronts. Firstly, it went against the dominant theological view that species were created by God to populate the earth. Those who held this view felt that the appearance of a multitude of species is a divine process and not a natural one. Secondly, at the other extreme, it spawned a school of thought that attempted to reduce everything in human experience to natural processes at the material level. This school felt that the human being could be understood through purely material processes. Darwin himself was quite apprehensive about applying his theories unthinkingly to the human realm, and on this point his contemporary, Thomas Huxley, wrote that systematic materialism may destroy the beauty of life. But it is in fact more than an aesthetic problem. It is not just the beauty of life, but even understanding what life is. Indeed, evolution at the human level does seem to involve new dimensions. In a retrospective on evolution, about a century after Darwin, Julian Huxley, the grandson of Thomas Huxley, wrote, "Man's evolution is not biological, but psychosocial. It operates by the mechanisms of cultural tradition. Accordingly, major steps in the human phase of evolution are achieved by ideological instead of physiological or biological organization." And he added, "In the light of our present knowledge, man's most comprehensive aim is seen not as mere survival, not as numerical increase, not as increased complexity or organization, or not as increased control over his environment, but as greater fulfillment. The fuller realization of more possibilities by the human species collectively and more of its component members individually. Once greater fulfillment is recognized as man's ultimate or dominant aim, we shall need a science of human possibilities to help guide the long course of psychosocial evolution that lies ahead. This is Julian Huxley. Thus, the arena of evolution at the human level was seen by these thinkers as the realm of mind and the realm of social interaction. The driver of this evolutionary process is the desire for fulfillment. So our aim then in this talk is to explore what we mean by a science of human possibilities. The human being is seen as a repository of infinite possibilities waiting to be realized. With this statement, Vedanta is in complete agreement. Human potential is infinite, and manifesting talent and ability is what Swami Vivekananda felt is the essence of education. He insisted that infinite possibilities are within every individual and would not tolerate anyone thinking otherwise. He said, as we heard earlier, do you know how much energy, how many powers, how many forces are still lurking behind that flame of yours? What scientist has known all that is in man? Millions of years have passed since man first came here, and yet but one infinitesimal part of his powers has been manifested. Therefore, you must not say that you are weak. How do you know what possibilities lie behind that degradation on the surface? You know but little of that which is within you. But behind you is the ocean of infinite power and blessedness. Moreover, by developing these possibilities, one develops confidence in oneself. And Swami Vivekananda felt this faith in oneself is the essence of religion. He said, he is an atheist who does not believe in himself. The old religion said that he was an atheist who did not believe in God. But the new religion says that he is an atheist who does not believe in himself. Swami Vivekananda was a strong advocate for education as a means for one to identify and develop one's talents, and in the process, acquire faith in oneself. As we said above, Swami Vivekananda defined education as the manifestation of the perfection already in man. And he defined religion as the manifestation of the divinity already in man. He said that there is no limit to the extent that one could evolve in either of these aspects in a single lifetime. The only limit is the one we set ourselves. Let me share with you two stories that illustrate this. There's an amazing story of how circus elephants are trained. So these are elephants that are performed in the circus. When the elephant is a baby, it is tied with a rope to a stake that is firmly planted to the ground, firmly planted in the ground. The baby elephant struggles to free itself from the stake, but is not able to do so. As the elephant grows up, it is still restrained with a rope attached to a stake. But now, the stake is only superficially in the ground. The elephant is now stronger, and the stake is only lightly inserted in the ground. And so, if the elephant were to try to free itself, it would be able to do so. However, it does not make the effort. Its frustrated attempts when it was a baby remain in its memory as a conviction that it is impossible to free itself from the stake. After some time, the trainer need not even plant the stake into the ground. When the circus is on tour, the stake is simply placed in a bucket, and still the elephant stays where it is. Such is the power of our mind. If we convince ourselves that something is impossible, it is impossible. Conversely, if we convince ourselves that something is possible, then it is possible. The universe conspires, as it were, to show us the possibility. There is another story which all of us are familiar with. It's told by Sri Ramakrishna. This is the story of the grass-eating tiger, one of Swami Pramadhananda's favorite stories. Once a female tiger was stalking a flock of sheep. It found its opportunity and was about to pounce on one of the sheep. However, the tiger was pregnant and the sudden movement killed it. In dying, it gave birth to a baby tiger. This tiger was taken into the flock by the sheep and raised by them. It learned to eat grass and bleat like a sheep. Slowly the tiger grew up. Obviously it did not become a sheep, but an adult tiger. Still it continued to graze on grass and bleat. Once another tiger came across the flock and was stalking it for prey. It was shocked to see amongst the flock an adult tiger grazing like the other sheep. It tried to approach the tiger to ask it what it was doing there, but the entire flock, including the grass-eating tiger, fled at the approach of the new tiger. Mystified, the new tiger withdrew and observed the flock for some length of time. Finding an opportunity where the grass-eating tiger was alone, the wild tiger pounced on it and dragged it away to the forest. All the time the grass-eating tiger was bleating pitifully. In the forest, the wild tiger let it go and told it forcefully, "You're a tiger, not a sheep." Grass-eating tiger said, No, I'm a sheep. Please don't eat me. Let me go." At this, the wild tiger dragged it to a pond and said, "Look at your reflection and look at mine. I'm a tiger and so are you." For the first time, the grass-eating tiger began to doubt that it was a sheep, seeing the reflection. Then the wild tiger gave it some meat and said, "This is your food, not grass." The grass-eating tiger started to relish the meat. Finally, the wild tiger said, "Now roar like a tiger." And the grass-eating tiger now felt more confident and made the attempt and was surprised at the sound it was able to produce. Finally, it dawned on the grass-eating tiger that it was in fact a tiger and not a sheep. I'm not sure how Sri Ramakrishna came up with this story, but it illustrates the point very nicely. We limit ourselves and prevent ourselves from realizing our destiny and manifesting our potentials. The science of human possibilities has to deal with this problem and show us a way to solve it. The solution is good education. Swami Vivekananda says education is the manifestation of the perfection already in man. What do we mean by perfection? We all have certain abilities and skills. These are more or less developed according to the interest and attention that we devote to them. If we are interested in something and pay attention to it, that ability will flourish and grow. If we neglect ability, it will slowly wilt like an untended plant. One role of education is to help us to identify our abilities and skills and to help us to nurture them. There is no human being alive who does not have latent abilities and skills. The problem, however, is that we are not allowed to or do not allow ourselves to discover what our abilities and skills are. In an attempt to help us in this process, society puts forward certain abilities and skills that it values. The educational system puts forward certain abilities and skills. These are meant to be helpful suggestions. But more often than not, we take them as prescriptions. The great people of the world are those who are able to break free from these prescriptions, or who are able to modify and tailor these prescriptions to their own personality. The important thing is to discover our abilities and skills for ourselves, and not to try and fit into a mold that society has cast for us. One may argue that social cohesion demands that we encourage certain skills and that certain other skills should be discouraged. For example, if someone were to say that they have an ability to be a pickpocket, should that not be discouraged? Of course, such socially disruptive talents should be discouraged. There's a beautiful teaching of Sri Ramakrishna that explains this. When a plant is young, it should be fenced around to protect it from cattle. When it grows strong, the fencing can be removed. When a young mind is in its formative and impressionable stage, certainly social values and expectations have to be taught. Certain prohibitions have to be put in place. These are the fencing. However, one should understand the temporary nature of this fencing. Once a degree of maturity has been attained, the fencing is not a help, but a hindrance. This does not mean that prohibitions are no longer necessary and that one can do as one pleases. None of us will argue that it is only young people whom we should discourage from engaging in thievery, but that we should let adults do as they please. We cannot exempt anyone from the prohibition against thievery. What it means is that once a certain maturity has been attained, external prohibitions may not be necessary. We regulate ourselves for our own good and for the good of our community, our society, and for the world. Now, the case of the pickpocket and thievery is pretty straightforward, but there are other rules that are enforced in an educational system, such as evaluation through objective means, knowledge of certain texts, the ability to pass examinations. This is an example of fencing that one ought to be able to remove when a degree of maturity has been attained. Learning material to pass an examination is understandable at a certain stage. However, if we never go beyond that, if we are never able to plunge into great literature or great science, not with a view to reproducing it within a time frame, but with an intense desire to understand its essence, then we will not have grown. It is only those who are able to plunge into an activity in this way that will be the innovators, the discoverers, and the leaders who take the subject forward. Huxley already indicates that fulfillment of the human being, individually and collectively, is the aim of life. While Huxley stops with psychosocial evolution, Vedanta goes further and says that there is a further dimension, namely spiritual evolution. This dimension is not only a natural fulfillment of psychosocial evolution, but it also gives the philosophical basis for the science of human possibilities. According to Vedanta, the essence of the human being is neither matter nor mind, but spirit. And as to what spirit is, we can say that it is not matter and it is not mind. That sounds circular, and it has to be circular. But positively, we could say that it is being, sat. The word being is used as a noun and not as a verb. The nature of this being is love and consciousness. The spiritual nature of the individual is what gives philosophical sanction to the science of human possibilities. As an embodiment of divinity, of spirit, infinite are the possibilities of manifestation. At our present stage, we are not aware of ourselves as being. We are aware of ourselves as body and mind. According to Vedanta, becoming aware of being is the goal of life. All of our efforts in life have that one aim in view, either knowingly or unknowingly, namely the awareness that we are pure spirit. In Swami Vivekananda's words, each soul is potentially divine. The goal of life is to manifest that divinity. Moreover, the struggle to realize that we are pure spirit mainly takes place in the psychosocial milieu. Progress in that struggle is what we term spiritual evolution. Through the practice of various disciplines, one begins to become aware of one's spiritual dimension. However, the word evolution is used with a different emphasis in Vedanta. We stress that evolution presupposes involution. Change is the manifestation of that which is already within. In the words of Patanjali, it is the infilling of nature. You cannot get out of a system what is not already there. We do not become spirit, we are spirit. Only we are not aware of this now, and we will become aware of it. So the arena of the evolutionary process is mind, a change of awareness. The Kathopanishad says, by mind alone it is to be attained. And Sri Ramakrishna says, in mind one is bound, in mind one is free. So for the spiritual aspirant, mind is the arena of struggle. But even if one were not interested in the question of spiritual evolution, even if we were only interested in existential questions of happiness, quality of life, a sense of fulfillment and belonging, even in this case, the arena of our struggle is centered in the mind. Therefore, whether we view this from the point of view of a spiritual aspirant or from the point of view of an existential question, we have to pay attention to the mind. It is through the mind that we can realize our possibilities. The science of human possibilities is all about shaping the mind to be what we are destined to be, to realize and manifest our full potential. So I want to dwell in the remainder of the time on the mind. I will not enter here into the discussion of whether the mind and the brain are the same or different, this mind-brain dichotomy. For most of what I will say, the issue is actually not important. I want to tell you a little bit now about a topic called neuroplasticity. The biggest obstacle to manifesting our hidden talents, our latent possibilities, as we observed, is we ourselves. We tend to put a limit on ourselves. It has become a habit for us to think this much and no more. Let's try to explore this. Let's try to explore how we limit ourselves and how we might free ourselves from that habit. Let me begin with the limitations of age. There is a tendency to feel that in youth one has many possibilities, but by the time one has reached a mature age, many of these possibilities seem to have been curtailed and they do not seem accessible. For many years, there was a model of the brain that supported this view. We know that our body is composed of many cells. These cells are born and they die, and they are replaced with new cells. We also know that cells specialize into functions. Thus there is a nerve cell, a skin cell, and so on. A brain cell is called a neuron. Those skin cells, for example, regenerate and replenish themselves. If you scratch yourself, the cells there die, but they will be regenerated. It was thought that brain cells do not. In other words, whatever neurons one has by the time of maturity is the limit. As these neurons age and die, it was felt that they were not replaced, and as a result, the ability to think was expected to decline with age. This is now known to be not true. Neurons do replenish themselves. It is possible for a brain to continue to maintain or even increase its supply of neuronal cells. Therefore, the idea that thinking power must degenerate with age is not correct. Neuronal stem cells in the human brain were only discovered 10 years ago. Stem cells are cells that have the ability to specialize themselves in different ways. A stem cell can become a nerve cell, a skin cell, and so on. Stem cells were thought, it was thought that it wasn't possible for stem cells to become neurons, but as I said, it was a recent discovery. About 40 years ago it was discovered in rats, 30 years ago in birds, but it was only a decade ago the first evidence that neuronal stem cells exist in a human being was found. There is considerable ongoing research to understand the mechanisms behind neuronal stem cells in humans. But the implication that's relevant for us is that the brain, like other parts of the body, continues to regenerate itself with fresh cells. Now the question can be asked by what methods we can maintain the health of the brain in terms of ensuring longevity of existing neurons and an abundant supply of new neurons. ongoing research here seems to suggest two methods that we should be aware of. One is physical exercise, and the second is learning. Physical exercise seems to trigger anticipatory proliferation of neuronal stem cells. It is as if the body is anticipating new challenges which will require additional brain power. In general, physical exercise is known to improve the blood supply to the brain. That makes us feel more alert. Of course, it's not necessary to overdo it. One is not trying to become a wrestler, in case I'm not. Simple cardiovascular exercise, such as brisk walking, is sufficient. But in addition to improving the blood supply to the brain, recent studies suggest that exercise also stimulates a neuronal growth factor. The other aspect is learning. Learning something new seems to enhance longevity of existing neuronal stem cells. There are studies that show that increased education seems to offer better protection from mental decline and degeneration. It is not the material that is learned, the subject that is studied, and certainly not the degree or the diploma, but the exercise that is given to the brain that is important, at least from a health perspective. The process of learning exercises neuronal activity and plasticity, which is something I'll come to in a minute. It stimulates the formation of new neuronal pathways and associations. This then gives us a new perspective on education, especially for the elderly. It is not a matter of knowledge, but of mental health and quality of life. Medicines can keep our body functioning well to some extent, but what keeps our mind functioning well? Healthcare systems have so far not paid attention to this very important aspect of our life. Without a healthy mind, our quality of life will degenerate. In fact, this principle is relevant to all of us, regardless of our age. We have to pay attention to the health of our mind. If our mind is not well set, we will find it difficult to hold on to what we have, not to speak of attaining new heights. From this point of view, we may look for activity that exercises our mind. I said in general, learning will do this, but towards this end, there are two concrete suggestions. One is to learn a new language, and the other is to learn to draw. Learning a new language improves memory and seems to turn on the control system for plasticity of the brain. Language skills develop our verbal and analytic left hemisphere. On the other hand, learning to draw improves our visual perceptual right hemisphere. I think that both of these should be included in our Vidyamandir curriculum, and especially so for the adults. You all know that we have a school for children. We also hold some classes for adults. But I've been thinking about the curriculum and what we should do for the adults. We are already teaching an adult Sanskrit class, and I think it should be supplemented by an adult drawing class. And I would encourage all of you to join such a class. It is worth repeating that the aim is the health of the brain and not the vocabulary or the artwork. Nevertheless, one will acquire the ability to speak in Sanskrit and to draw, and that itself will reveal hidden possibilities within us. Another way we limit ourselves is through past experience. I was not able to do this in the past, so I will not be able to do it in the future, like the baby elephant. This assumes that the abilities of the mind remain static. However, we all know that this is not the case. We go to school and take a course on a subject that we know nothing about at the outset. After some lessons, we find that we have acquired some knowledge of the subject. If we apply our mind, then by the end of the course, we would have reached a certain level of proficiency. If on the first day of the course, I was asked a question about the subject, I would not have been able to answer. Would it have been correct for me to surmise that I would never be able to answer the question? Certainly not. The course itself guides me and helps me to slowly acquire the ability to answer the question. One will note, however, the key word here is that one has to apply the mind. To apply the mind means to be interested and to pay attention. These two, interest and attention, are what give thoughts power. These are the tools at our disposal to encourage certain thoughts and to discourage certain other thoughts. If we compare our mind to a garden, interest and attention are the gardener's tools to weed out the bad plants, to aerate the soil, and to water it, and to strengthen the good plants. Sri Ramakrishna used to sing the song, "O mind, you do not know how to farm. If you had planted the seed of the mother's name, how rich a harvest you might have reaped." Also, there is another point about a course of instruction. Namely, the course of instruction takes us step by step from where we are to where we want to be. It is not the case that we attempt everything all at once on the first day. We begin with small steps. If we examine our own life, we may see the things that we would like to do, but which seem to remain undone for many years. Many of us have this. We make, especially on New Year's Day, we make all sorts of resolutions. And by the end of the year, we find we've not even started. Perhaps what keeps them undone is that they appear too big and complicated, and we are intimidated by that. If we could devise our own course in which we divide up the big task into small steps, then we would have a place to start. It is said that the first step is the hardest. Once that is taken, each successive step becomes simpler. The solution to procrastination, the solution to unfulfilled dreams, the solution to unrealized possibilities is to start. Begin the task in any way you can and think of reaching the goal in terms of the next step to be taken. This is the idea of the yoga of small steps, and it applies equally well whether it's our spiritual life or any other thing that we're trying to achieve. We may ask ourselves why it is that after years of practicing meditation, we don't seem to be any more proficient at it than when we started. Why is that? The answer is that we've not broken up the task into small steps. We still think that to meditate, we must sit down and at once become absorbed like Buddha. In fact, there are many preparatory small steps that have to be taken first. I'll give you a simpler example. We speak of meditation, but let's consider the simpler task of falling asleep. Now, I know many of us think we're very good at this, but actually it's quite a mysterious phenomenon. We don't just plant ourselves on a sofa or bed and expect to fall asleep. We make preparations. We wear loose, comfortable clothes. We lie on a bed that is comfortable, not too soft, too hard. We turn the lights out so we're not distracted by other things. And then we lie down and free our mind from anxieties and worries. And then we wait. Then the magical moment arrives and we fall asleep. We actually don't know how we fall asleep. All we know is the preparations that we went through, what happened before we fell asleep. We also know that when we awake, a certain amount of time has passed. When we get up, a certain amount of time has passed. And maybe, if we're lucky, we feel rested. So from that, we surmise we must have been asleep. It's a surmise, it's a guess. Meditation has to be similarly approached in terms of preparation. And of course, the step that we find most difficult, but it's the one we deal with every evening when we go to bed, is to free our mind from anxieties and cares. You cannot expect to get absorbed in meditation if your mind is loaded down with worries and cares. We do this when we go to sleep, but we're not able to do it when we sit for meditation. If you want to make progress in meditation, you have to approach that task through the yoga of small steps. Look at the preparation and look at the step-by-step process. It is interesting that recent advances in the science of the brain support the view that the brain responds with physical changes to accommodate the efforts to accomplish a task or reach a goal. Beginning with the breakthrough experiments of Wilder Penfield, the famous McGill neuroscientist, It was discovered that there seems to be a correlation between various functions, such as seeing, hearing, talking, and so on, and activity in specific regions of the brain. So Penfield's experiments seem to suggest that one could draw a map of the brain, with each region being allocated a function. So this part of the brain processes visual images, this part of the brain processes sound, and so on. Though Penfield did not say so, others after him assumed that these functional maps are static. In other words, they are more or less the same for everyone, and once they are established, they do not change. Recent work shows that these functional maps are in fact dynamic, not static. In other words, the maps change. In some sense, we know this from a folklore perspective. Suppose someone is blind. Then what happens to the part of the brain that processes visual images? Is it simply idle? Does the physiological defect of the eye also result in wastage of brain space? The answer is no. That part of the brain is drawn upon to perform other functions. Perhaps sound, smell, or some other sensory processing is performed in that space. In other words, the amount of brain space dedicated to processing sound or smell increases. This is why we see that those who are, for example, blind have a heightened ability in some other sense, such as smell or sound. This dynamic property of brain maps has a name. It's called neuroplasticity. And it's a subject of current study and research. It is controversial still, in the sense that the scientific community is divided about whether this property exists or not. But from the point of view of Vedanta, there's no question that it exists. Vedanta clearly says that the material universe is a manifestation of spirit. Desire and intense thought makes physical changes possible. They also make physical manifestation possible. It is said, for example, that the cause of rebirth is unfulfilled desires. Those desires propel the jiva to seek the materials and means by which the desires can be fulfilled. This is why it is taught that if one wants to transcend the cycle of birth and death, one should try to become desireless. This was put into more meaningful context by Swami Vivekananda, who explained that one should try to become free from selfish desires. The desire to help, to serve, and so on are not bad desires. And this is why Swami Vivekananda said, may I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls, and above all, my God the wicked, my God the miserable, my God the poor of all races, of all species, is a special object of my worship. It is interesting that when someone asked Swami Ranganathan if this would be their last birth, he replied to them, yes, for you it is the last birth, but me, I will have to be born again to do Swami Vivekananda's work. What mechanism determines the function that is executed in a particular space of the brain? As a question in neuroscience, this is of course a very difficult one, and perhaps one for which research is still ongoing, but an answer is not known. But from a user perspective, a user of the brain, it once again comes to interest and attention. Sufficient desire combined with effort creates neuronal associations and affects the functional map of the brain. In other words, if you want to develop an ability, physiologically, it means more of the brain has to be dedicated to that activity. And how do you make that happen? Through interest and attention. Neurons are very fascinating objects to study. As a layman, even I can see that. Neurons are cells that communicate with each other by firing electrical signals. Neurons are not actually connected to each other. There's a gap between consecutive or adjacent neurons. That gap is bridged by an electric signal that is released by the neuron, and then neurotransmitters or chemicals that communicate from the end of one neuron to the other. That's a very vague way of saying it. But from this point of view, one may view thoughts as a series of neurons firing. If a series of neurons tends to fire together, a habit, a tendency, or a way of thinking is formed. That's sort of the bridge between the physical model and what's happening in the mind. In this regard, there's a principle known as Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together, wire together. In other words, each time neuron B fires after neuron A, the tendency for the sequence to repeat is increased. And in that sense, they are wired together. The same principle was stated from a psychoanalytic point of view by Freud as the law of association. The mind is a complex associating machine. One sensation triggers a flurry of thoughts. These thoughts trigger other thoughts, and this cascade continues. Why a particular sensation or thought triggers another particular thought can only be answered empirically, as saying that one thought is somehow associated to the other thought. Each thought is associated to many other thoughts, and so the flow of thoughts is not quite predictable. On the other hand, there may be dominant patterns in associations that are predictable. If we initiate a thought stimulus and observe what thought occurs next, one can uncover the network of associations and thus get an insight into our individual way of thinking. This is the basis of Freud's psychoanalytic technique of free association. It is also stated in Vedanta as a step in Raj Yoga, namely Pratyahara. In the 8-step path outlined by Patanjali, the first two are about moral and ethical excellence. The next two are about physical well-being. The 5th step is the first psychological step in the entire method and has to do with observation. In this step, one observes thoughts without holding any thought, without identifying with any thought. As a silent witness, one observes the way one thought associates with another. Whereas Freud's method required the intermediacy of the psychiatrist and the translation of thoughts into words, in Pratyahara, one observes thoughts without translating them into verbal or any other form of expression. Moreover, in this process, one is both the patient and the doctor. So what we've done in the last 40 minutes is just begun a discussion of the science of human possibilities. There's much to think about here, much to discuss, but from what we've discussed so far, we can take home 2 principles that will help us to realize our inner potentials and possibilities. And I've sort of tried to give you the most concrete ones. Firstly, we must have sufficient physical and mental exercise to maintain healthy neuronal activities. Secondly, we must introduce the yoga of small steps into all of our efforts so that big goals become more attainable. That we all realize our latent possibilities and reach spiritual culmination is our